And it takes me just a second after when you see the notice to mute it so that we don't hear the sounds while we're talking. So just one moment. That takes me just a second. All right, very good. Go ahead, Mike.
I love that we got a little snippet of the YouTube. Well, hello and welcome everybody to the LGBTQIA plus Intersectional Task Force. We're a subcommittee of the City of Salem Human Rights Commission, and I'm Mike Waters, resident of Ward 7. I'm the chair of this task force, and my pronouns are they and them. And we pass it popcorn style to the members of the group. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to Kelsey.
Hi, my name is Kelsey Murray. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a member of Ward 4 and a member of the Human Rights Commission. And I'm going to pass it to Danny.
Thanks, Kelsey. My name is Danny Castillo, Odavalos, and I also work with 4-H in Oregon State University. I am the Marion County Youth Program Coordinator. And I was just invited here by Gretchen just to kind of get to know some people and become a little bit more familiar with my community. Oh, my pronouns are they, them, she, her.
And how about
I'm supposed to popcorn somebody?
Yeah, you can pass someone, yeah.
I'm going to go to Kathy.
Thanks, Danny. Hi, I'm Kathy Ostrand-Punch. I'm a member of the Human Rights Commission. My pronouns are she, her. I live in South Salem, and I'll pass it to Tricarico.
Thanks, Kathy. My name is Tricarico. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a resident of Ward 2 and a member of the HRC. I'm on my phone, so I can't see. I think that's everybody. Gretchen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Gretchen. I'm a she, her pronouns and staff to the commission. Welcome.
Great to see everybody today. Our second agenda item is public comment. I understand that we did not receive any outside public comment. Danny, you are welcome to participate in our discussion today. You can also make public comment now during this public comment section if you have something you'd like to say sort of right off the bat.
Yeah, just my public comment would be, I do appreciate your presence and the fact that you're here. I just kind of moved to West Salem and been kind of getting to know the community as well. So the fact that there is a committee out there to help the LGBTQ community, it has been really awesome. And thank you so much, Gretchen, for helping inviting me in. So thank you all. I'm glad to hear you that you exist awkwardly. And thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're so glad you're here. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item, which is approval of minutes. Gretchen sent out a corrected set of minutes to us this morning. I wondered if folks got a chance to look at that, if anyone wanted to make a motion to approve those and second and so on.
I move to approve the updated minutes from last meeting.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, you can raise a hand, say an aye, whatever you like. Okay, any opposed? Right, minutes are approved. Great. Well, the meat of our meeting today is continued discussion around safe spaces. We have some new things to look at, courtesy of Gretchen and Kathy and myself. If you didn't get the artist brief, it was sent out at the very last minute. I literally did it at the end of the day today, so I apologize for the delay on that. But kind of looking at our agenda, the first item was really around those prerequisites or that checklist that we wanted to provide to potential participants in the program in order to evaluate sort of their readiness for the program. Do you want to talk about that a little bit, Gretchen? I think you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you. Somebody said today, I'm allowed one of those a week. I guess I'm gonna copy that and say that. Forgive me, I have some notes, but I want to also call up the checklist document that was sent out also today, because that'll be helpful as well. Okay, great. So I appreciate the notes and those of you who've connected with me from the last meeting, as I wasn't able to be there, but I tried to put together a document that helps begin to capture some of the ideas that were shared, but wasn't certain about if that checklist is what you have in mind for prerequisites. You'll see it was organized to have like what pieces may be required as a beginning place before a person could participate in the program, as opposed to things that are recommended and great, but a person could, like, so those required elements might be those prerequisites. So that's an element to check in on. I also noticed words jumped out of the notes for me, words like certify or audit. And it got me wondering about our capacity and all of the nuance and detail that can go into things. Like, for example, there's really elaborate formal reviews of spaces to whether or not a physical space is fully ADA compliant. I was also thinking about, like, if we audited or certified maybe that staff had attended training, and then the very next week the employer hires a new employee who makes an egregious mistake, and how does that get experienced when we quote unquote certified the program? So I wondered if we wanted to take a minute to think about what that means, you know, and maybe this checklist is that format, like to help say, well, what we mean is that we were able to visit and clarify that at the time of approval, these conditions were met. And that's really what we mean, and have the precision. Like, for example, people complete the checklist, and then maybe there's a site visit to the location where we're able to walk through and observe the observable elements. And would that be sufficient? So I thought that might be part of the discussion. But you'll see I can walk you through the document, offered a few notes. I tried to write it to the audience of a person who might be managing a space. If you're managing a park or you're managing a business, to try to explain how this works, what we're going to do, and then roll into sections. And you'll see the sections so far are customer service, design, decor, physical environment, and policy and procedure and training. And of course, they're not all built out by any means. I got working on it, and I thought I didn't want to get too completely far without finding out if this is kind of what we have in mind, because you can see we could build it out quite a bit more and add in a lot more detail, such as Kathy provided us information on racial profiling prevention. We could add in quite a bit just on that topic. You can add in quite a bit on a lot of topics. So I'll pause there and see what are elements that you're interested in clarifying tonight. I can see, again, some key questions like, is this what we mean by prerequisite? Is this format digestible? What do we mean by certify? I think those are good questions for us tonight.
Thanks for teeing that up, Gretchen, and for all the work kind of put into the checklist. I really appreciate it. I wonder what people think.
I think, if I am remembering this correctly, we had talked about like a business or someone like applying for this, like using like a Google form or something, and like attaching like proof, but that could be like a picture of their signage or like their employee manual, or like a text, like a short text box with an explanation. And then like we can take that and like follow up as necessary. Maybe do that site visit and be like, all right, great, you're good to go. I think that's what I remember us talking about. Does that sound right, folks?
I missed the last meeting, and I feel like a lot of this discussion probably happened then, so I'm not. I'll be listening and learning, I think, up until this point. From what I understand of the check, from what the checklist appears to me, it looks like if somebody is interested in being part of the program, they would fill this out and submit it, and then someone would review it to determine if that was a business that or an organization that should be a participant. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think our goal, and tell me if I'm wrong on the goal or if it's a little bit different, but it was to try to find the right balance of welcoming businesses that are on the journey, are on the path and are trying, versus versus having something that's so concrete that if a business doesn't meet a couple of the desired requirements, we wouldn't want to, necessarily limit them from participating, but we would want to be able to have discussions about these are the things that you didn't meet, in terms of requirements, and what are your, and kind of talk to them a little bit about what are your plans for moving forward. And that's probably going to vary quite a lot by businesses, keeping in mind that some of our businesses are owned by very members of our communities who do not have access to the resources that a large business would have to address these issues. And I thought of that particularly when I was going through this and saw the website requirements for ADA compliance. Some of these businesses are making a Square site, or a website using who knows what service. And they do not have on-staff technical people who can help them navigate these issues. So it's things like that occur to me that, the businesses are not all going to meet all of these recommendations or requirements, but we wanted that opportunity to evaluate them. And am I framing that correctly for those of you that were there?
Yeah, I think so. And I think we had talked about like you have to like have like 3 points like in this category. So like if you don't have the resources to have like an ADA compliant website, do you have like multilingual signage? Something like that. But that was like more just a throw out.
Like a little bit of balance.
That's right. I remember reading that, and I thought maybe once the checklist was completed, you'd be able to go back and determine what would constitute like a pass versus not yet, but we want to keep working with you kind of category. And I do suggest, I tried to start putting in a little bit of notes around like what the standard would be. And I thought, in addition to maybe some, if you liked the simple notes in the document, that's one way to go. But an additional way that might really be helpful is a really specific tool that the commission would use to evaluate the checklist so that we can be really transparent about what you're looking for, I think it would also help with just equity concerns and with risking, oh, we kind of like these folks, so we're going to drive them in, but these folks, not as much, and they don't get to do it, but we couldn't really articulate why, so it really could help to be concrete with the criteria.
And I think, sorry.
No, please, Kelsey, go ahead.
And I think like being that clear would be really helpful. So like if someone isn't like approved, then we can give them concrete examples of just things that they can do so that they can like join up this safe space community. I think that's important.
One other question I just wanted to throw out for your consideration is, I wonder how to help the organizations participate in a way that's transparent while recognizing that any document that gets submitted into the city is potentially disclosable in the public records process. I'm really hearing a lot of grace and interest by each of you to respect that property owners or business owners or nonprofit organizers who run spaces might be on a pathway and intending towards good things, but might not be there yet. And I wondered how comfortable organizations might be to express honesty about where they are and where they aren't in light of it being disclosable for public record. And that thought occurred to me. And so I wanted to share it with all of you as you think about how to prepare it in a way that can encourage honesty and participation.
Yeah, question for you on that vein, Gretchen. So like, let's say we decided to go with like a walkthrough to assess this. Would that walkthrough have to be a public meeting because like if more than two of us are doing the walkthrough?
Thank you, Tricarico. As I understand it, it's exactly what you said near the end of your sentence, that it would depend on whether you have a quorum. So if you had a less than a quorum doing a walkthrough, I don't think so. Why don't I, since this is a program that you're intending to formalize, why don't I talk that through with our legal counsel and try to understand when something becomes, this is a unique situation for the city, I think. So why don't I explore that a little bit? The general rule of thumb is if you have a quorum.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good concern to bring up, Gretchen, because I wouldn't want a company or a business that we're interacting with in the program to not share, their needs and their concerns because of the public records requirements anytime they're interacting with the city. And I would want to offer like some level of privacy there, because I wouldn't want this business to be like, oh, well, we have this issue with this employee and have that, be put on blast, because that's not conducive to getting them in alignment with our goals. But I do understand our legal obligation to follow that policy. So I would really appreciate some guidance on that and how to best handle that. Yeah, and then also being mindful of like our capacity to go through these processes with these businesses. We are a small but mighty commission, and I know everyone is volunteering their time, so I really appreciate that consideration too.
One of the things that Gretchen and I chatted about a little bit earlier was as well thinking through the business owner's experience of this and or the organizational leaders experience of this, and in particular sort of what is the incentive for participating in the program. Obviously there's the decal and the listing right on City of Salem website. Today business owners can put in a fun rainbow flag in their window without checking with anyone about whether they are a welcoming or safe space or not. So they can do that of their own volition. So that decal, while we know its value and we think that there's a lot of value in people participating in the program, I think one of the things I've been thinking about is we need to really articulate that value a little bit more for that community, and that might be like making the DEI business case, that that is so often made, and sort of in our materials, sort of reaching into all of those reasons that businesses do these things. They don't do it just out of compliance. They do it because it is going to enhance their operation. So just something that I've been thinking about as we, you know, I, again, super supportive of the approach with the checklist, but we want to have it balanced with all these other factors, like our capacity, like the need to incentivize businesses to do this, and those kinds of things.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Mike, because on the one hand, I think a big bonus is that, relationship with the city of Salem and access to those resources. And on the other hand, we're having a conversation just before that about kind of the limitations to what we can offer the businesses because of it being volunteer and having so much time and energy. I would think that building the relationship with the city, building the relationship with the HRC and city council would be a huge part of that, because business owners are often very interested, as they should be, in the things that we're doing or the things that the city council is doing. And I think this would be one way to demonstrate that the businesses is kind of in alignment with our goals as a city. I think the DEI business case is a really big part of that as well. And I think the resources that we provide and that kind of commitment to ongoing education and support is going to be really huge too. So I would like to highlight those as well. Yeah, that's kind of what came to mind for me.
So there may be a few pieces to write out, including the ongoing education and support. Make sure that's articulated as you wish. The business case for DEI or the advantages, maybe a statement from council or something to help convey what you were saying, Tricarico, about the alignment to the mayor and council. There may be some pieces to build into the materials.
Yeah, I love that idea of the council support. And it's another way that the businesses are identified, and get that visibility that's going to be positive for them.
And this is like reaching for the moon and the stars, but I wonder if in the future, if the city had some sort of budget or incentive for DEI efforts, if we could include that. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm thinking like, grants or funding or programs, when we get more and more funding for DEI efforts, that we could then provide to the business owners, like whether that's the training or some other recognition or like small business support, because I understand that hiring a DEI consultant can be really costly for a small business in a small town. And that would just be another area that we could look at, in the future when we have bigger budget. Because I think this is a topic that's going to keep growing and we're going to see more and more need for it.
Thank you. Yeah, it certainly begs the question about the existing work the city does with grants and incentives and loans and other programs to help build up and support the business sector, and where are the alignments that are possible with what's happening now, and then where can it go? It's a great question.
Yeah, I'm thinking a lot about how a lot of corporate businesses tie their DEI objectives to bonuses or monetary incentives. And I'm not always a fan of like paying people to be inclusive, but I also understand what kind of we're talking about, like the what's in it for me aspect, right? And if we can provide some sort of incentive for businesses to really dive deep or as deep as they can into the concepts we're using in this program, that's awesome. And again, kind of can offset costs associated with the extra training, the extra time and energy it takes to take these subjects on.
Great question. I'll certainly circle back with the team that works in that part of our city and see what I can learn about that.
Thank you.
Well, I think we're, oh, go ahead, Gretchen.
I was just going to ask if the format is on the right track. I certainly heard Kelsey's good point, and I think I also imagined like it would be a fillable document with the ability to create attachments. So I was thinking once we kind of got a look at the text, it could be converted to something like that. Wanted to get a sense of, I know we can't give people a non-fillable Word form for sure.
The only thing, and I mean, I think there's still some more development to do on it, but the thing that kind of generally struck me was the use of the words required and recommended. I would almost not include those elements, but instead give them an opportunity to say what they've got and what they've not, and then, you know, maybe we develop a bit of a rubric on our side that helps evaluate it. But I kind of shy away from anything being required, because if they're missing one thing out of 20 or however many there are, I wouldn't want to kick them out or not have the opportunity to talk about that, because it could be an easy thing for them to fix. If it's, you know, multilingual signage, well, they could make that happen pretty quickly with some guidance that we could provide them. So that was the only thing, like on a general note, that really struck me, was that I don't know that any of these things should be required, but I wonder what you all think of that.
Yeah, I agree, Mike, because I think, sorry, did somebody else go?
No.
Oh, I think we talked about having like options, and it was almost like a cafeteria style where the business would kind of choose the things that they have, and maybe we would have, you know, like, here's 5 options for like gender inclusivity or something, and you need to have like 3 of these 5 options or something. That's completely spitballing, but it was more flexible so that it wasn't like oh, well, if you don't have a gender neutral bathroom, like, get out, you aren't invited, you know. Whereas, is there something that we could do where it's just changing a sign, like Mike mentioned, to have them be in alignment with the program? I think especially with when we're starting off and businesses are already asking like, what's in it for me, it's going to be hard to require things if we're trying to kind of get them to buy into the program without, you know, an immediate obvious incentive beyond what we've already talked about. So I think that's another reason why I am looking at more flexibility rather than like black and white, you're required to have this. Yeah, that was kind of my thought process behind that.
I agree with both of you as far as not having explicit requirements. And it might be that they have a few things that they're doing now, and maybe there are some things they could work, you know, still be part of the program, but work toward, either because they weren't aware of it, or they just didn't have the capacity themselves to be able to have the signage. I don't know, something like that, but have maybe some goals for them to work towards. I would like it to be as flexible as possible. And we need to be consistent. And if there is a business or an organization that we don't feel comfortable approving, we need to be able to articulate why and have that be a consistent thing, so that everybody's kind of treated the same. That's kind of a concern I have looking at the checklist in the beginning, but I think what we're talking about tonight alleviates some of that.
Yeah, I also see it as an ongoing thing, right? Like, I talk about this a lot. I don't see this as something where a business can check off a list and be like, well, I'm done, because I guarantee you there will be more things that we're discovering about, you know, Salem residents that we need to accommodate, you know, areas that we're not aware of. things that will just come out as people progress and become more visible, right? And as our community becomes more diverse. So I would also like something that talks about kind of our ongoing expectations. And this could be a vehicle for that, where it's like, okay, if you have 10 out of 15 things, we'd really like to see you have, 16 by the time your renewal comes around, or, have a goal, some kind of progress you're working towards.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. We also have to be, I think, prepared for businesses to change hands over time, or backslide into things that are not, that are not the best. And so that renewal conversation, I think, is really important.
It's almost like a yearly performance evaluation.
It is a little bit. It is a little bit. Just a little bit. So given that we're kind of still in this space of revising, refining the checklist, I wanted to check in a little bit about timing. We initially had thought about like a June of this year launch. I think we're not going to hit a June of this year launch. And I think ultimately it's about putting together the right program. And this is something that we want to be many years in Salem. So it's okay to not be on a sped up timeline, but just wanted to kind of check in with the group. Does the pace feel okay? Is it all right that we take a little bit more time, maybe launching late this year or even early next, to make sure we're kind of doing the right thing?
Yeah, I think I want our this rollout to be as smooth and seamless as possible. Obviously there will be bumps and learning and pain, like pain, growth pain, that's what that's called. And so I think as if we push it back like intentionally, I think that's totally fine.
I think it also gives us a little bit more time to try to figure out how to get in with the business community. Gretchen and I kind of spoke briefly about some of the outreach that she's done, and it hasn't yet resulted in us having sort of that champion that we want from that community to help us carry this forward into those spaces where business people get together. So I think a little bit more time would also help with that outreach piece, and maybe we can get some of that input and feedback from that community so that there's a little bit of buy-in when we roll it out. Okay, sounds good. Our next agenda item was around the asks and HRC equity asks, and kind of the status of that, as well as, do we have specific asks for our program, I think is the question of the day. But Gretchen, do you have an update there?
Sure. Building off the notes from the last meeting, I have a couple things to share, and I'm interested in your questions and feedback. So first, rewinding back to the equity asks document. And for those of you who are new, the commission developed a series of asks or recommendations or ideas that could help advance equity in Salem. And that included community input and a vote from our broader Human Rights Commission. And then, so those were shared to the mayor and to city council. There were some questions about kind of how those were received. Those were sent in a PDF document in an email directly to each of the mayor and members of council, and then also shared with the city's leadership team, the members who direct the different departments at the city. In addition, it's come up periodically, you know, as conversations ensue, people say, oh, can I have a copy of that? Or most popular question was for the equity lens, which was a subset of the document. And so I've also just sort of shared it here and there with colleagues as it's come up in conversation. So just wanted to explain how that was distributed. Having them receive it is certainly different than a formal adoption or an acceptance of it. They've received it and received your recommendations, but to, like, for example, in contrast, the commission also prepared recommendations related to Chapter 97, which similarly were emailed out. And then a member of City Council made a motion to recommend that the city take the next step as it related to Chapter 97. And then the council voted, and then hence the action that's taken with proceeding on that. So there's differences in when people receive information and how it proceeds to take note of. That's not to say that there's not a lot of work underway throughout the city, and some of the things relate to the asks and have been informed by the asks, and others are off in different directions. And that's what I've been trying to report on at our monthly Human Rights Commission meetings. I might pause there. I have a couple more notes on a couple of the other things, but maybe I'll pause there and see what kind of questions or feedback there might be on that. Okay, well, another item was, well, what about having one ask would be a multi-year budget? And one of the things about the city that's important to note is, generally speaking, everything runs year to year. There are things that are in the city manager's recommended budget that carries forward as the beginning that the budget committee takes a look at. So whatever, there's a document that moves forward every April or maybe late March that is called the city manager's recommended budget. And then that document includes lots of things. And then the community members who make up the budget committee and the mayor and the council review that recommended budget and recommend changes and additions and deletions and et cetera. And they spend a couple months on that. And then the budget is adopted formally in June with those changes. And then that carries forward for another year. So when I think about a multi-year, generally, anytime the city makes a multi-year commitment, it's always subject to that annual budget renewal. So there's not really a way to lock in a future year commitment. The most successful would be to just be in that city manager's budget year after year. This year, we were able to be in as part of some savings. Moving forward, I think we're in a really interesting question, because this is the last year that the city's general fund doesn't go into arrears. There's a roughly, depending on how you cut it, an $18 million gap beginning next year. So they're not comfortable adding things at a time when they're going to be looking at how to achieve cuts to sustain, because one of the other things about cities is they're required by state law to advance a balanced budget. They're not allowed to run a budget in arrears at the city level in Oregon. So next year, I'm advancing ahead past the budget that's currently in development, which is generally described as a status quo budget. The following year is a year when you'll either see cuts come in or there'll be new approaches for revenue. And so it's hard to predict right now if we'd be able to have some additions in that budget. I think it would really depend on how they approach the potential cuts that are happening. So I don't know if that helps provide some context, but it's hard to predict next year given the deficit that's predicted in the city's general fund, coupled with the formal inability to do multi-year budgets. Let's see. There was also notes on things like, staff accountability and how do we be sure we can be accountable to each of the items in there. And there are some things that are present at the city, but I wanted to ask for a little bit more detail and information about what you might be interested in. And then I can try to go and get further information. There's definitely, there's elements in our position descriptions, there's expectations of following policy and procedure and doing work in ways that are equitable, but I wasn't sure precisely what I should be looking for or reporting back on. So I just kind of wanted to invite the dialogue and see what questions you might have on that aspect of it. But I don't know if that responds to the items there, or if you'd have other discussion or questions for me. I might add, I think part of this discussion might also have been clarified in the checklist. I think, like when there was discussion at the previous meeting about, well, let's make sure the city is one of the organizations that participates in the Safe Spaces program. As the city's Human Rights Commission, you'd want to see the city be a participant. So is the police department a safe space? Are the parks a safe space? Are the fire departments a safe space? Is City Hall, like all of the library, all of the spaces that the city manages? And so I know one of the questions as we contemplated how to help see if the city can meet the objectives was, well, what exactly does that mean? To what are the commitments? And so I think the checklist goes in a direction of trying to be specific about what that looks like. So, so if you're the manager of the parks, you could say, well, yeah, I want to be a safe park. What does that mean to the Human Rights Commission to be that? And can I meet those objectives? So your checklist that starts to define that, I think is really helpful towards helping the city understand its own ability to be a safe space, as we know more and more what that looks like and means.
I think one of the things that we talked about at the last meeting from the city perspective was that the city is not just a participant, the city is a leader in this work, that the city actually needs to be a bit of an enthusiastic participator. And that could mean a commitment that goes beyond what an average business would be able to do. So an average business is going to get a window decal. A window decal at the library is maybe not enough, right? It's a pretty flippin' big space. And my dog's going a little nuts. I'm going to go on mute for a second, but I wonder if others could chime in on kind of what we were talking about there.
Yeah, I was kind of wondering when you were talking, Gretchen, if there's like a code of conduct for city employees that we could review. Code of conducts can be really, really simple and really basic, or they can set some really high expectations around how employees handle conflict, how employees handle inclusivity, diversity, and anti-racism in the workplace. I'm also wondering, how could we incorporate some of the principles of the Safe Spaces program and like the messaging, like Mike is saying, a decal at the library is not a lot, but a giant poster about our expectations might be more interesting, right? And really send the message, because I actually attended a really interesting kind of educational thing today about the importance of the messaging and the visuals. Well, that wasn't the only topic. It was one of the things that struck me of what we see when we enter a space, right? So if I'm going into the library and, I'm only seeing like white, able-bodied, cishet people in the advertising and the imaging, like that doesn't really send a message that the space is for me if I don't fit those descriptions. So I think there's a lot we could do around the messaging and the visuals of city spaces when we're talking about these tenants, when we're putting forth these expectations, when we're actually making the space feel safe. And that's just like one element, but I think that we could kind of up the ante, so to speak, for the participation in the city, because I agree with Mike that the city should be a leader in this effort and an example.
Thank you. Great. That gives me a good idea of what you're thinking about. I can gather some information and get back to you. Yeah, that's good.
I think that was the main thrust of our conversation last time, Gretchen, was really around how the city participates. And by the city, it also includes police. And I think that's where the HRC equity asks come in, because if some of those issues that are in the HRC's broader asks are not addressed, specifically by the police, it would be really hard for us to say, oh, they should put up a big safe spaces sticker or a big safe spaces sign. It feels at that point a bit disingenuous if there hasn't been a coordinated response to the community's asks. So I think how the city shows up is really, really important for this program. And I think what I'm hearing from committee members, and you can correct me if I'm overstepping, is that we need to see from the city what that commitment can look like. Knowing that, everything on HRC's equity ask might not be cleaned up by tomorrow. We still kind of need to kind of have a sense of, do we feel comfortable as a committee, as an HRC, even being sponsors of a program, if the city sort of isn't walking the talk. I don't know what is going on with the dog right now. I don't know if it's a squirrel situation. It's just, it's gotten really out of control. I'm gonna go back on mute.
That's fun. Like Kelsey's cat, Mike's dog. It's been really fun to get to know. Well, we'll have to look carefully at where we are with the equity asks and, what's been done and what's still in development. I remember Lieutenant Aguilar pretty early on brought back some information to the commission about some of the things that related to police. We'll have to see, I guess, delve into those specific items and see where we're coming out, and see what you all think. That's a good point. I mean, maybe there's more work at the city level to do prior to launching a program that comes ultimately out of the city, or maybe you're comfortable with where the city is and it's a matter of just doing some better communications and signage to help visually convey that work. So that gives me a sense of kind of what to collect and circle back with. Appreciate that.
Great. Well, we have about 10 minutes left, and Kathy and I both contributed some drafts to this discussion. Kathy, do you want to talk about the racial profiling information that you provided? Is there anything specific you wanted us to know out of that, or should we just kind of dive into people's reactions to it and whether that covers it?
So the task came out of, I think, our January meeting. It's been a few months ago, and Gretchen had provided at least one website. There may have been a couple somewhere that I had started looking at. I just kind of started doing some research and pulled some bullet points and put them, is really all it is. So if it's helpful and there's bits and pieces that can be used in the materials, that's great. If there's not, or if there's more that we would rather have as part of it, I'm happy to dig back in and see what else I can pull. So I just wanted to send it to the group to see, is this consistent with what we were thinking at the time? And I know there's been a lot more discussion since that meeting about what the program's going to look like. So it may not even be quite the same as what we were thinking.
I really like it. I think it's really succinct and clear. If I was operating a business, I would find it really helpful. Sorry, Kelsey.
Oh, no, you're good. Yeah, I agree with Mike. I think it's really easy to see your items, especially around training, and kind of give them a starting point. I think maybe one of the last bullets, it says hire a diverse staff. I'm wondering if we wanted to expand or narrow that to an ethnically or racially diverse staff, to be a little bit more specific, because Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's more than, yeah. I don't know. What do others think about that? There can be diversity in other areas than race is kind of why I like leaving it open, but at the same time, I mean, I think it means a lot of different things.
Yeah, I think my thinking is like if a company hired a bunch of people who are LGBTQIA plus, but they're all white.
Yeah.
It's like that their whiteness still has is going to allow them, and they will most likely have racist beliefs and perpetuate that. So that's just what my thinking was.
I think I agree with Kelsey in the sense that I think that what a diverse staff looks like could be expanded on, because DEI language is evolving. And I will tell you that 10 years ago, when my workplace first started doing DEI work, there was an awful lot of talk about how diversity is more than race. It's also your personality and your interests and your hobbies. And while that was a nice segue to get people thinking about DEI and how it relates to them, it kind of missed the mark in the fact that there's also historically groups that just are targets in our society, and there's a real power issue. So I kind of also understand from a business owner's perspective that it's not always easy to hire diverse staff, and especially racially diverse staff in this labor market where it's so hard to recruit anybody for some types of roles. They might have a very, very limited pool. So even saying, being aware of the racial diversity of your staff and striving to hire a racial diverse staff might be a little bit more realistic for some business owners in the current climate.
Yes, Mike, I love that.
Yeah, and I also wonder if we can expand that to be, not just having diversity in your frontline staff, right? Having diversity at all levels of the organization, because kind of to Kelsey's point of, if we have diversity, but it's like all white folks, like how helpful is that? Or if we do have diversity on the front line and all of our, entry-level workers are people of color and all of our CEOs and managers are white, like that's not diverse and equitable. So I think we could definitely expand on that one, while being realistic, and also talk, I mean, maybe it's more of like having a, I don't know how to word this, but like having a diverse, having approach in hiring and retention of diverse staff, because like you can get your diverse staff in the door, but if it's not a place, which is the point of the program, right? If it's not a place where they're valued and respected, then they're not going to stay. So I think we could expand on that for sure.
Yeah, that all makes sense to me.
But I will say everything else is really fantastic, Kathy, and I really appreciate your work on this.
Thank you. I actually did it a while ago and I had kind of forgotten about it until coming up on this meeting date. So
well, at the risk of just glossing over the fact that I did this artist brief at very last minute, we only have 3 minutes left in our in our meeting. So I wonder if we should take a look at the artist brief next time. What do you think?
I didn't realize it was so close to 7 because I think The four of
And
us
do
need to be
you
in
still
another
have your
meeting at
7 o'clock? Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I'm just like, well, I'm gonna be here for 2
All
hours,
right.
but not everybody is.
Do we have any member remarks and announcements? Important.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, we will kick the artist brief to next time. Gretchen, you have a member remark or announcement?
Sorry, just quick question. I'm looking for a contact with the current Capital Pride group. The city is looking to issue a proclamation for Pride, and we want to connect with people around that. I don't know if anyone can help me locate who's running that this year. I've lost track of that. So just wanted to put out that request.
I did send you an email.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
late in the day, and
I
the
missed it.
person
Thank
who
you.
did it last year was Zachary Cardoso, so I gave you their email, and then I sent you their website, and that's all I know.
Thank you.
I'm not sure who the leader is right now. Do any of you know?
No, I was just looking in my email. I don't think I have anything.
Thank you.
Well, always one to end a meeting on time. As you know, thank you so much for being here. Enjoy your next meeting, and I'll see you next month.
Thanks, Mike.
Bye, all.